What's up, Psychedelic Investors? My name's James, and you're watching The Psychedelic Investor, your number one news source for psychedelic stocks and everything MindMed. Boy, oh boy, do we have big news for you today. JR Rahn is stepping down as CEO effective immediately. He's to be replaced by Robert Barrow, who was previously the Chief Development Officer of the company. So in this episode, we're going to discuss what exactly happened. And then I'm going to give you some of my thoughts on it. We're going to take a look at how the market is reacting. And then we're going to move into discussing everything that JR accomplished in his tenure as CEO, and also taking a look at who Rob Barrow is and where the company will go from here. Guys, I really hope you enjoyed this episode. It is a really big one. This is probably one of the biggest news that we have had since the beginning of this channel. So if you do enjoy it, just do me a small teensy-weensy favor and like and subscribe, as well as hitting that notifications bell to ensure that you don't miss any episodes going forward. Enjoy the episode, guys. Alrighty, so let's start with what exactly happened. Well, this morning, MindMed put out a press release that said basically that JR Rahn is bye-bye. He is no longer the CEO of MindMed, effective immediately. Like I said, Robert Barrow will now be taking over. However, this is only on a temporary basis. The company is actually going to start a new search for a new CEO. However, Rob Barrow will be included in that. So for the moment, it is temporary that Rob Barrow is acting CEO. However, it might become permanent. Something that's important to note is that JR Rahn is going to be helping the company in their search for a new CEO. So honestly, guys, this isn't too surprising. A lot of people, specifically on Reddit, have been hypothesizing about this a lot recently, especially since JR Rahn sold about half of his shares this year in 2021. A lot of people saw this as a precursor to him stepping down from the company. Honestly, personally, at the time, I didn't really believe it. I thought that they were a little bit out to lunch, a little bit cuckoo, but it turns out they were right, and I'm the cuckoo one. So major props to everybody who guessed this and argued why this was going to happen on Reddit. So to move on to a couple of my general thoughts on this, I've got two really big thoughts that kind of intersect with my own personal investing philosophy. I've got a positive thought, and I've got a negative thought. So we're going to start with my negative thought. So one of the big things that I look for when I'm considering investing in a company is whether the company is still founder-owned and operated. This is important to me because oftentimes when you have these really cool companies trying to do groundbreaking things, the founders are the visionaries. They bring in the energy. They know what they want to do. They know what they want to accomplish, how they want to change the world. And then when they step down and the suits move in, the magic leaves. They start talking about how we can squeeze out the most money out of this project, and all the kind of vision departs. To be clear, I'm not saying that that is going to happen in this case. In fact, I don't think it will be the case. I'm just saying that personally, I like the companies that I'm invested in to be founder-owned and operated, and it hasn't been founder-owned for a while. Like JR Rahn only owned like 2.5% of the company, I believe, but now it's also no longer founder-operated. Again, that's not the end of the world, but it is just kind of a general negative feeling I have towards this move. Moving on to my positive thought on this. Another one of my kind of core bedrock parts of my philosophy when it comes to investing is I want the leadership to be experts in the field that the company operates in. So for example, here with MindMed, we have a medical company, we have a pharmaceuticals company, we have a science company. So I would want the CEO of this medical pharmaceutical science company to have experience, to be a scientist, to be a doctor, to have experience in pharmaceuticals before. And while JR Rahn brought lots to the table, he was a veteran of Silicon Valley, he was a tech guy, he definitely had his pros. He was not a science guy, he was not a doctor, he was not in the pharmaceutical world. Now we have Rob Barrow as acting CEO, and Rob Barrow does have a master's in pharmacology. Rob Barrow does have a multi-decade track record of working in pharmaceuticals and working in scientific settings. So now we have a company that is led by a scientist. So those are kind of my two conflicting first thoughts that I have on this move. On the one hand, it's sad to see that the company is no longer founder operated, but But on the other hand, it's nice to see that the company is now led by a scientist. So those are two conflicting, excuse me, I forgot how to speak there for a second. Those are two conflicting thoughts that I have, and I don't really know which one will win out in the long term. I'm kind of just reacting to this as I learn about it. I've only had an hour to really sit and reflect on this, but time will tell. So let's just take a moment to think about how the market is reacting to this. So I'm going to go ahead here and I will pull up the stock price. Let me refresh here. So we can see that at the time of filming, the stock is actually down by 11 cents or 2.83%. So it's really not down by that much at all. A 3% swing in either direction is kind of a normal day for MindMed, honestly. So we can really kind of tell that the market is taking this in stride. It's not like everybody panic! No, that's not it at all. Everybody that seems to be invested more or less seems to be holding. It's swinging back up and down, so maybe by the end of the day we'll get to positive. I don't really know. But the long and short of it is here that it doesn't seem like the market is reacting overly negative to this. And that's not surprising, because if you head over to Reddit here and take a look at what some of the hardcore investors in MindMed that have been there for months or years are saying, and these are kind of the core constituency for MindMed, the core people that really believe in it, more or less everybody seems to be taking this either in stride or calling it fantastic news. So if you just scroll through the main page of the MindMed investors page here on Reddit, you'll see that the top voted thing here is congratulating JR Rahn. They said that they got the ball rolling. Another one here is saying that this is fantastic news. We're now being led by a doctor. Another one is saying this is an improvement over JR. But in general, everybody's just saying that JR, he did his role, he accomplished his goals, and now it's time for a new chapter in MindMed. So Reddit doesn't seem to be taking this as a negative at all. They seem to be taking it either as a positive or a wash. So before we get into who Rob Barrow is and this new direction that MindMed will be going in, I think it's only fair to take a moment and reflect on all the successes that JR had. So first and foremost, JR Rahn founded this company. He was the one with the vision. He dealt with some issues, some mental health issues in his past, and he personally experienced the benefits of psychedelics, and he realized that perhaps this is a solution to some of these crises that are plaguing our society today. Perhaps we can use psychedelics to help with the opioid crisis, the pain crisis, depression crisis, the anxiety crisis. He recognized that in many ways our society is sick, and we need solutions if we want to survive long term. And he brought these solutions. He came up with the vision. He started the ball rolling. Now, having a vision is all good and fine, but you also need to start these clinical trials. You need to be able to really show the science here. And that's exactly what he did. Under his leadership, MindMed started like 15 plus different clinical trials, including 5 of which are either in phase 2 right now or set to begin phase 2 relatively quickly. As we talk about all the time on this channel, the number one thing you should be looking at when it comes to investing in psychedelic medicines companies is the number of clinical trials and how advanced a company is in their clinical trials. And under JR's leadership, MindMed is probably the leader of any public or private company when it comes to the number of clinical trials and how far progressed they are in those clinical trials. So now that he's leaving, I don't have enough good things to say about JR Rahn. I'm not sure if I said that right. There's so many great things that I have to say about JR Rahn, let's put it that way. So on top of this, on top of starting all these clinical trials, the other major thing that psychedelic medicines companies need to do is raise capital. Clinical trials are expensive, guys. They cost tens of millions upwards to hundreds of millions of dollars. So if you don't have the money in the bank, then it doesn't matter how great of an idea you have. If you don't have the money, it's not going anywhere. And under JR's leadership, the company raised $204 million USD, which is setting them up nicely for the next few years as they progress these clinical trials. That is a major accomplishment. So again, congratulations to JR for everything he accomplished. And lastly, we talked about how JR himself personally wasn't a scientist. However, what he did was go out and recruit an all-star team of scientists. So this starts, of course, with their president, Dr. Miri Halperin Wernley, and then also it expands to Rob Barrow, who is now CEO, but he used to be the Chief Development Officer, Donald Gerlit, which I'm sure I'm saying his name wrong, sorry Donald, who is Chief Scientific Officer, and of course Bradford Cross, who is the Chief Technology Officer. So something that is very important in leadership is acquiring the talents that you don't personally have. JR Rahn was leading a science company, leading a medicine company, and he personally didn't have the background in those fields. So he went out and he acquired an all-star team of people in these fields and really got the ball rolling. So finally, what he did that was so important was he got the company into the big boys league. He got the company listed on the NASDAQ. This is going to help with liquidity. This is going to help with prestige. This is going to help with legitimacy going forward. Now that JR Rahn is stepping down, looking back at his tenure in the year plus that the company has been public, and then some time before that, of course, it really seems like he has done an absolutely fantastic job. He has done so many great things in attracting talent, attracting money, getting the science rolling, that I really don't have anything negative to say about him. The worst thing that anybody really had to say about JR Rahn over the past year was that he was selling stocks. And now that he's no longer CEO, that doesn't matter anymore. So taking a good look at his track record, all I can say is, as a shareholder of MindMed, thank you, JR Rahn. You did fantastic. Moving on, looking towards the future of their new CEO, Robert Barrow, let's just take a look at some of his history. Well, first of all, he has a solid track record in the pharmaceutical industry. We already mentioned how he has a master's in pharmacology, and he used that in many different institutions as a leader in these institutions to really push the ball, both in psychedelics and in pharmacology in general. So he has a long track record, and I don't have enough time to go over it all, so I'm just going to touch on two different roles that he has had in the past. First, he was the Director of Drug Development at the USONA Institute. And for those of you that don't know, the USONA Institute is a not-for-profit institution which conducts preclinical and clinical research on psychedelics like psilocybin. And this is important for two reasons, and Barrow's role in the USONA institution was important for two reasons. First, obviously, he has lots of experience working with psychedelics, such as psilocybin. Specifically, he managed to get psilocybin, a trial launched, a phase 2 clinical trial launched for psilocybin to treat major depressive disorder, and then he got a breakthrough designation from the FDA. Moving on to the second reason why his role at USONA Institute was so important, building off of the first one, is while he was there, he built a relationship with the key figures in both the FDA and the European version of the FDA, something called the EMA. And these personal relationships are going to be instrumental going forward for MindMed, because these are some of the next steps that the company needs to take. They need to be able to get all of these into phase 2 and then phase 3 trials. They need to get FDA approval for them. They need to get the breakthrough status, hopefully, for LSD, which hopefully will come in the next few years. So his role at USOMA really comes in handy here. Another place that Barrow worked at in the past was he was CEO of Olatech Therapeutics. And Olatech Therapeutics is a company which worked on pharmaceutical solutions for an assortment of acute and chronic conditions, inflammatory conditions, and, crucially, pain reduction. So specifically, he oversaw a launch of late-stage clinical trials for analgesics, and just as a reminder, analgesics is just a fancy and kind of gross word for pain treatment. And another reminder, MindMed recently, what did they just start? They started Project Angie, which is working on analgesics, and it's all about creating new pain medications, specifically with LSD. So we can see this scientist, Robert Barrow, he has a long track record of working on and leading projects which MindMed hopes to be groundbreaking players on. The last thing that's important for a CEO is having good leadership skills. And unfortunately, at this point, I just don't really know how great his leadership skills are. I mean, just looking at his resume, you can see he was CEO, you can see he was Chief Development Officer, so obviously he needs to have some leadership skills in there. But that's a little bit of an open question for me going forward. I'll try to do some research on it, see what I can dig up, let you guys know, of course. But as it stands now, it seems like Rob Barrow has everything that it takes to be quite possibly a great CEO. Now, taking a step back and looking at where MindMed goes from here, what is the company doing from this point out, now that we're really opening a new chapter, perhaps even a new book? Well, first and foremost, they're going to continue the mission. MindMed, under JR's leadership, had the mission to ease the opioid epidemic, ease the crisis of pain that exists, stop treating our kids with amphetamines that have ADHD. Like, that just seems absolutely wacko. Treat the anxiety crisis, the depression crisis. Like I said, our society is a sick society right now, and we need solutions. MindMed has been on the forefront of trying to find those solutions, and that will continue under Robert Barrow. Of that, I have the utmost confidence. In terms of who will be the long-term CEO, because again, this is just temporary, well, my money's still on Robert Barrow. When we take a look at his resume and his leadership experience, it really does seem like he is a great candidate to lead MindMed long-term over the next few years as we enter into these crucial stages for the company where they are going to start moving into phase 3 trials, and maybe when they're going to start commercializing these products. This is probably the most crucial stage that MindMed has ever been in before, and we want the best person possible to lead them going forward, and it kind of looks like Robert Barrow, may be that person. Now, despite saying this, it is possible that it could be somebody else. I personally, like, fingers crossed, praying to whoever you want to pray to, Buddha, Jesus, whatever, am hoping that it will be somebody from within the company. I really hope that they don't go grab somebody from outside the company to lead them. So if they have, let's say, Dr. Miri Halperin Wernley as their new CEO, who's currently the president, like I said earlier, then that would be fantastic. If they had Bradford Cross as their new CEO, who's leading their tech division, which is supposedly set to become a bigger and bigger part of MindMed going forward, well, then that would be fantastic. But, I mean, I don't have any inside information, obviously, but I assume that it will be Robert Barrow, and that's why they chose him in the first place, but we're just going to have to go and see. So guys, that's basically all I can say on it at the moment. I've only had about an hour or two to really ruminate on what this means for the company and where it's going forward. Probably in the next week or two, I'll have another episode on this. Maybe we'll dive into Robert Barrow's background more and try to make some more predictions on where MindMed is going. But for now, that's kind of my general thoughts on it. I had the one positive thought that it's now being led by a scientist. MindMed is now being led by a scientist, which is nice. But then the one negative thought that it's no longer being led by a founder, although hopefully that won't matter too much, seeing as the company is still being led by one of their leading members. So what do you guys think? I'm really curious. Is this something that seems really negative to you? Are you considering selling shares because of this? Or is this just a natural progression that MindMed had to take in order to become this leading pharmaceuticals company? Let me know down in the comments. I read all of your comments all the time, and I try to respond to as many of them as possible. So I really want to know. Let me know down in the comments. Guys, I love you all. We will be covering this more going forward. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.